So, Half Empty Studios is a company formed by Tran Ma and myself. We are a two-person operation, hence the name Half Empty. It's half Miguel, half Tran. We've been doing visual effects for about 15 years, but we left the industry to kind of focus on our own projects. The stuff you're seeing here is all stuff from our own films that we've done, and as you can see, most of it has been live action with a very heavy emphasis on visual effects. Creatures are obviously something that we're very into because that's what we did for so many years before that. We were creature modelers at Tippett Studios, Digital Domain, Luma, Lightstorm, and we loved doing this stuff and we loved working on our own films. The problem is these things would take a very long time. So a project like what you're seeing on the screen right now from the Ningyo actually took us about 4 years to do this 30-minute short. A big part of that was the assets, of course, and the lack of things like mega scans, but a bigger part of it just came from the render hit. A frame like this, for example, would take 24 hours to render, whereas in Unreal it would be much faster. You would have a much heavier setup time, I think, to get it to look this realistic, but nonetheless, once you get it, you would get a very fast output. So we did this for a while, and the thing that brought a lot of attention to us was the fact that all of this stuff we were doing it in our living room. So we were building out all of these sets with minimal resources. This was literally like a warehouse space that we got, and we just turned it into a shooting stage. So this was our house. So we completely destroyed our living conditions and just built everything out to make this film. And whatever we couldn't afford, we would just build it out in 3D. So again, you could see that's Tran holding the scaffolding, and then we would just shoot our friends. We would build the costumes, build the masks, everything, and then we would just build the environment in CG. So this is like my friends and my brother, and we would expand on this and turn this into a much bigger thing. So this goes on for a while, so I'll just skip through it, but this is all available online if you want to see it. If you look up the making of the Ningyo, or the home making of the Ningyo, you'll be able to see this low budget approach to filmmaking. You could see, like, on a shot like this, it's literally hats on sticks, creating the illusion of a crowd in the foreground. So we loved this. The project got picked up by Thunder Road, and we thought like our life was set. COVID struck and everything just kind of fizzled out, and it was a heartbreaking moment for us. And that's when like the Unreal Fellowship came in and really made a big difference for us. We saw the ad for it, I think on Facebook or whatnot, and we both applied independently of each other because you can't apply as a team, and we both got accepted, which was a huge deal for us. So we were ecstatic about this, and we're like, all right, let's do this. We're gonna jump in and we're gonna make this film. And we both started doing this project called, this is little snippets of it, which is Vision Quest, which is inspired by this Mexican and Native American fable that we want to go back to eventually. And we loved it. We did this in 4 weeks. We didn't know how to do Unreal at all up to this point. We'd never touched it. We installed it literally the week that we got started in Unreal on the Fellowship. And yeah, we were, let's do this. Let's jump in full force and let's see what comes out of it. So once we were done with that, Noman approached us and asked us if we would be willing to make another short all in Unreal. I think Alex Alvarez, the founder of the school, saw that we were very, very depressed at that point because our Ningyo project had died, and we were very demoralized. So he asked us if we wanted to do this. We had 6 months to work on it. We went way over that. So we ended up spending 10 months, uh, and we jumped on the opportunity. So this is how we basically made The Voice in the Hollow. I encourage you to see the movie if you haven't seen it already, so that this all makes sense and it'll be much better. So the inspiration for this came while we were shooting the previous film, The Ningyo. We shot some of this stuff in a cavern in North California called the Moaning Cave Cavern. The Moaning Cave Cavern, besides having a cool name, we really didn't look much into it, and we went down to the bottom of the cavern and started shooting some of the stuff. And the woman that runs the location manager, she told me, hey, whatever you do, don't step over on that side over there, because that's where the skeletons are. So I was a little taken back by that. I already don't like the fact that I'm down at the bottom of this cavern. And I'm like, what do you mean the skeletons? And she's like, yeah, the reason why this is called the Moaning Cave Cavern is because people would report to hear the moans of a little girl calling for help, calling for her father, calling for someone to help her. And it's kind of like the opening that you see on the bottom left. It's not the actual cave, but it was up on the top of the hill. So people would approach this hole trying to help this little girl, assuming she fell like 8-10 feet, and they would slip and fall 250 feet to their death. When they excavated the cave in the turn of the century, they found body on top of body on top of body, which is assumed that it was all people coming and responding to the moans and the cries of this little girl. When they went to the bottom of the pile, they found a 10,000-year-old skeleton of a Paleo-Indian girl that had crossed into California through the Bering Straits. I thought this was such an amazing story, and it stuck with Tran and I, and we wanted to try to come up with something around this. We actually had written a feature film version that had nothing in the bigger sense to do with this story, but this was a story within that story. It was actually a comic book that the girl had written, and it was what ultimately became the short film that you guys have now seen, The Voice in the Hollow. The big inspiration for The Voice in the Hollow itself is, of course, kind of a Cain and Abel. If we're going to go into an origin story, which is what we thought would be the best approach, like, okay, let's tell the story of how this first girl ended up in this hole. So we thought, let's do a Cain and Abel type story. Let's make it about two sisters, though. And let's kind of flip it on its head. Like, I kind of like the idea that what if Abel was not this perfect person? Yes, he was the favorite of the father, but what if he just was not a good person and he kept taunting his brother until his brother had it, and then he killed him accidentally, and then he's considered this ultimate evil. I love that, and I just love the idea of this temptation and this old school type of evil. So visually and tonally, I would say a big inspiration came from the 1960s cinema and 70s cinema. In particular, the spaghetti westerns, the horror films, Black Sabbath. The Great Silence, however, was the one that had one of the bleakest endings I had ever seen in my life, and I couldn't believe how dark it was. And I loved that. I love dark endings, so I wanted to get something that was very much inspired by that, and applying that onto everything. So, you know, the Mexican or standoff at the end, the typography, all of that is kind of in there, typography. You can see big inspiration. In terms of lighting, a big inspiration came from Mario Bava, who was really, I feel, the originator of this, and then Dario Argento that took it and went a bit further with it, with stuff like Suspiria. But you could definitely see the connection here in terms of the color palettes. And this is stuff that I also would see even before I knew who these people existed in stuff like Tales from the Crypt, which was a huge influence on me as a kid. So one of the things that we knew is we could not make this a technical showcase piece. It wasn't about that. Now that we had gone out and we had sold, or we had optioned the project, we had optioned out a project to a big studio and it failed, we knew that one of the things that people were going to look out for, or kind of scapegoat us, is or not scapegoat us, like pigeonhole us into like we're visualists only and we're not storytellers. So we purposely were like, let's try to make it more about the story and the characters than the technical prowess of it. These are some of the characters that Tran has done in the past, and they're wonderful. They're beautiful. They're all done in V-Ray and Maya, ZBrush. So we knew that we could get this level of quality, but we didn't want to spend all this time worrying about the subsurface scattering, the refraction of the eyes, the hair grooms. We were like, that doesn't matter. Let's just make sure that what's important is that the characters have emotion and that you actually feel something for these characters and what they're going through. So the first thing was trying to find our inspiration visually, and we really wanted to go with real aesthetics from the region and push it stylistically a little bit more, but we really loved these in particular. The hair on these, I just absolutely loved them. I loved kind of how they look like ram horns, which we put on Allah, who's like the more stubborn, hot-headed one. And you can see some of the body paint, which we loved. So this was our discovery process, kind of trying to find what these characters are going to look like. Like I said earlier, we didn't want this to be a technical showpiece. So we're like, let's make them look like they're carved out of wood. They're all hand-painted. And we'll have a super shallow depth of field to have the illusion of dolls. So this is kind of finding the look. And this is where we finally ended up with Koa, our protagonist. And I love her. You could see the colors and the skin paint. I don't know. I just really love it. But the color is very vibrant, really pop from the skin. And the only thing that this was an issue with later down the line was that orange color was almost like that blue dress that you would see in those memes. Like, is it blue or is it gray? This thing constantly was changing. So we had to constantly be tweaking that color in the shader to try to get a consistency, because it would go from like totally muted to like neon colors. So, and we weren't changing it. It was just because of the lighting. So here we are, just more angles of it. And you could see that she has like 0 pelts on her, no leathers whatsoever. It's all just fabric. Okay. Her sister, however, who's the better hunter of the two, you could see the hair, as we mentioned earlier, like the horn, the ram horns. She has leather pelts on her. And that is just to show that she is the better huntress of the two. So she would have some of her prey on her. This was the very first test, motion test that we got. So this was some Mixamo animation, and we were so thrilled when we got to this point, because we thought, okay, we could do this. We did not have motion capture experience. We did not have any retargeting experience that's connected to motion capture. We're not animators at all. We are modelers, professional modelers that are trying to transition into this. But this was the time that we were like, okay, you know, we could figure this out. You could also notice it in this version, the background looks more like a typical African savanna, which is something we completely deviated from later, primarily because we knew we didn't want this to be a technical showcase piece. It was about the story. So we knew we couldn't make this look as good as something like The Lion King. So we didn't want ours to be the Diet Coke version of The Lion King. So we were like, let's push the style to make up for the technical aspects of it. This is the father. So you could see how much he changed. Kind of bland looking, turning into angry father, and at the end being more of an aloof character. I love this guy. So he turned out great. I'm very proud of how he turned out. And lastly, I think of the demo is the shaman. So again, inspired by actual masks from the region. I believe most of the leopard stuff is from Nigeria. And we actually have bought a few of these, like the real ones, which we have in our collection. So all the clothing is done in Marvelous Designer, and we use that to kind of give us free secondary motion. Our anteater, we know there's no anteaters in Africa, but we don't care. This is our world. And we were like, what's the coolest animal? Obviously, it's the anteater. So what would he look like with pajamas? And that's what you get. Okay, so pretty cool. And here's early tests. I actually don't think it's early tests. This is actually close to the end of his death. And this is all hand animated, so not everything is motion capture. This is all done by Alon, a friend of ours, and simmed and Marvelous. So the Morning Star. The Morning Star represents the devil, of course. Morning Star is the name, one of the many names of Lucifer. We didn't want this to be a religious piece again, but you know, if we're gonna go with the Cain and Abel, this evil could be whatever you want to call it, and this is how we went about it. So this is basically the first drawing of it, and then just creating the terrain. I wanted it to feel like a giant pit to hell. I'm a big Star Wars fan. Return of the Jedi, for all its flaws, is my favorite movie of all time. I know it's not the best one of the three, but it's the one that I saw as a kid. It's the earliest memory I have of going to the movie theater. So without a doubt, this is inspired by the Sarlacc pit, for sure. There's no question about that. And that's the first final kind of look of it. So I modeled the tree in Mudbox, and then put that all together, shoved a bunch of Megascan stuff into it on a shot-by-shot basis, and you get something like that. Okay. The village. So we knew we had to build this ginormous village. We wanted very strong silhouettes, simple to read. However, again, there's just two of us, so how do we build an entire village with limited resources? So what we did is we grabbed a bunch of Megascan pieces and kit bashed it to make all these individual pieces. So everything is Megascans. Well, not everything. The fabric is Marvelous. And then in some of these, like the actual shell, or the outer shell, is done in Maya, but then textured with Megascans. So this is all like Marvelous. And then you can see all the branches, Megascans, Megascans with Marvelous, Marvelous and Megascans. Even something like this, which is a drum, that was one of the Japanese drums in the Megascans library. We didn't want it to look like a Japanese drum, so we tied ropes around it, retextured parts of it, or not retextured it, I should say, recolored it, put the little decal of the leopard on front, and there you go. Even things like sailboats, these were all done with Megascan pieces, with the exception of the canoe itself and the fabric of the sails. Okay. Ceremony. This is the first sketch I did for it. So this is where I was like, okay, this is what I want it to look like. It's kind of comical when you see it because it looks so goofy, but this was enough for me. I could see this and be like, I know exactly what I want this to look like. So this was the first well, this was the first drawing, and then this is actually the final. And I know they're completely different, but to me, they're kind of the exact same thing. This is exactly what I pictured it looking like. What's kind of funny is the way we work is I'll take it to a certain point, and I just kind of can't. I just don't know how to improve it anymore. Then I'll give it to Tran. She'll improve it, and then she gets stuck, gives it back to me. I'm like, oh, I know how to make it better. I'll keep working on it, and eventually we get to something like this. So the big leopard in the middle is inspired again from Nigerian leopard bronzes. And this Tran modeled this piece, which I absolutely love. One of the tough things about this one in particular is as authentic as we wanted to be with the leopard designs, the masks are actually pretty amazing looking. And like I said, we own a few of them. But the sculptures, the full sculptures of the leopards always kind of look kind of cute and goofy like these. And we're like, okay, we want the feel of this, but we want them to look more badass. So that was a little bit trickier. So here's just a walkthrough of the actual temple, and all mega scans, all the fabric is marvelous, and then the statues are all handmade to be very modular and procedural. The floor is mixer, which we absolutely love. Okay, but you can see you can turn this camera any direction and you will have the entire set. So you could play a video game in here if you wanted to. It's full 360. Casting.
Hi, my name is Janet.
The casting was originally, the goal was to do this in Los Angeles, and we tried it in English, and it broke my heart. I said, we have to do this in Swahili.
I'm from Kenya, and I'm playing the part of Allah.
So, put out a casting call for Swahili in Los Angeles. Swahili I chose because it was the most common language in Africa. So I thought we would find a bunch of people, besides English, of course. And we didn't find anybody. So we ended up reaching out to talent agencies in Africa, and no one responded to us because we're nobodies. And what we ended up doing is going on Fiverr, of all places, looking for audiobook translators. And they were amazing. They were not actors. They completely crushed it. We did every take hundreds of times until we got it. And I could not be more proud of our actresses and our actors. Just the coolest people ever. Yeah. Motion capture. So we did do a lot of motion capture, and we did do a lot of hand animation, but this is just showing you how we approached the motion capture. So this was done with a window, the Xsense window, and we shot this at the Noman stage. We own the mocap system, but we were given access to this location, which is great. And you can see it's pretty close to the final stuff. The actress that we used is Caitlin O'Connell. She did all the motion, even though you see two actresses there. Caitlin was just working with another actress to play off of, but she ultimately played all the roles of the women, and I played all the men. We would have loved to have got the actresses actually from Africa, but we just could not afford to bring them in. Some were in Kenya, some were in Tanzania, and some were in Nigeria, so it was just too unaffordable for us. So we've known Caitlin since she was like 11, so she was just great. You can see we rented these yoga mats, which were a huge help to us. They were pricey to rent, but they were without a doubt the most important thing we had that day besides the suit. Like it was priceless. Even though you see the mocap there, like her falling down ultimately had to be animated by hand. We weren't able to use that mocap, but we had reference of it, but it ended up being animated by hand. So yeah, you can see Caitlin O'Connell and Mary Amerson. I ended up doing the motion capture of all the faces. So all of this was done with Radical Variance Helmet and Mocap X. That brought the data back into Maya, and I was able to edit it. So when I say edit, you can see like the left, that's the raw motion capture, and the animation pass on the right. If I play it again, you can see like the eye line in particular kind of looks a little lost on the left. And on the right, she looks a little bit more vicious. You see, the eyes are really where it made a big difference. And the truth is that's probably coming from the fact that since I'm doing all the motion capture and I don't speak Swahili, I had to write all the Swahili into a phonetic script that I had to memorize. Plus, I had to memorize the timing of the dialogue and get it perfect. And some of these words are, they're not easy words for someone that doesn't speak Swahili to pronounce. So that eye getting a little bit funky there is probably me cheating and looking at the script, which of course you can't have. Lighting, we didn't render in passes, but we broke this down just so you could see kind of our lighting breakdown. There was no passes. What we got is what we got. Okay, you can see a lot of things in the foreground to cast shadows onto the character. So something like this, you have this really awesome shadow in the foreground. Those are just giant spheres blocking the light, tree branches to make it feel more organic. Just total rubbish just to get it to look cinematic. Don't think physically. Think like a live action shoot, right? Well, I guess that's the same thing. Don't treat it like, oh, I can't light it this way because that's not physically plausible. Live action movies are not physically plausible. The lighting is constantly changing to get the best shot. So don't worry if it doesn't necessarily line up with the previous shot. As long as it kind of does, the shot looking good is more important. So this is just showing the progression of each shot. So you can see this is almost the entire 10 months, us constantly refining it. And keep in mind that in a lot of these are points where we thought, wow, we got it, this is great, we're done. And there was just something constantly in the back of our shoulder just kind of saying, it's not good enough yet, you gotta keep adjusting it, until we got it right. So it's just constant iterations. And what was happening is we would finish an entire sequence, move on to the next sequence, we would naturally get better at using Unreal. And we were like, wow, we could light that way better now if we went back and we redid it. So we redid all that sequence again, redid all the next sequence again. And then when we would get to the end of that, we were like, wow, we've gotten so much better at Unreal since then, and just repeat that 5 or 6 times. You can see some of these just look hideous. So 2D animation. Originally, I wanted to be a 2D animator when I was a young kid. That's right around the time that basically Disney 2D animation just kind of died, and it just seemed like a bad idea. My follow-up idea was, I'm going to go to CalArts and be a stop-motion animator. And in my next life, I would love to work for a company like Leica. But we always try to put 2D animation if we can. and this was our attempt at putting 2D animation. This was an 11th hour edition, which was really cool. I'm super happy we did this. I could not be more proud of this team. This is a tiny group of guys in Iran that did this. They completely crushed it. I just love this. I love 2D animation. I want to keep it alive. And even though we are using motion capture, we're using it not because we don't respect the art of animation. We use it because we can't afford it. If I could have an army of 3D animators, I would love to have. I would have loved to have done this all with the human touch of an animator, but we just can't afford it. So motion capture is what we use. So that's how we approached it in 2D side. VFX, like Houdini stuff and blood. Original intention was to go really bloody up front. More with the like samurai type feel. Pulled away from this because I thought that it was a little too much, and I didn't want Koa to be unlikable. I wanted Allah to be unlikable, but that was just too much, and that was just me watching way too much, kung fu and samurai films. So moved away from that. This is kind of where we landed, and this was done by our friend Dakota at Noman. This is one of the few Noman students that got to work on it. Not got to, but we wanted to keep it tight. And he came in and crushed it. You could see all the grains. That was all imported with the Houdini to Niagara plugin, and it worked out really well for us. Like I mentioned earlier, all the clothing is done in Marvelous Designer, so you could see all the beautiful secondary motion that this brings to the animation. Even something as small as the mask. This mask was added weeks before the premiere. So I just thought that I wanted something that visually represented her wants and her desires literally on her face. So I did a drawing on top of one of the renders and I gave it to Tran. And she matched it 1-to-1. And we just went in and we added it onto all the shots. We had the whole sequence edited, so we had to just go back in and add Allah commenting on her quote-unquote stupid mask, and we had to add the shot of her taking the mask off. That's it, though. That's the beauty of Unreal, is that we're able to do that and be like, oh, I guess we got to re-render these two entire sequences and add a mask in it, and it was like, that's fine. So this is when she goes into the trance. This was a sequence that I edited one morning. Tran was still asleep, and I was like, let me just try to go insane with this thing. And I put the sound, like temp sound in there, and that's the temp sound is what's still there for the most part. Put that in there, go completely insane with this sequence, and then I showed it to Tran, and I was like, look at it before you say no. Just watch the whole thing, and we're super happy that we added this. So this is more towards the finale, so there's a lot of wind blowing to add to the drama. Just look at the amazing secondary and tertiary movement that this thing is adding. So cool. We absolutely love Marvelous, and we actually we like the guys at Marvelous and women at Marvelous quite a bit. They've helped us out a lot on our new project that we're working on. Okay. So our priest. And that's it for now. So we documented this entire process, literally 90 hours of making of every week while we made this thing. We documented the process of making it. It's not glamorous in any way. It's literally us going 2 steps forward, 5 steps back, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, until we get to the finish line. So it's all there, 90 hours. If you really want to see how to make a film from nothing, this is the place. I don't think there's anything else that's as documented as this is, for better or worse. I'm not saying it's entertaining, but it is what it is. So what's next for us? The Voice in the Hollow is coming back in a different way that we can't talk about yet, but you will hear some announcements on that, which are, to say exciting is an understatement. It's just absolutely massive what has happened with this film. The attention that we've gotten from people that we have huge admiration for. So it's been amazing. So what's next for us is The Threadlings. The Threadlings is our take on, it's like a love story, like a love letter to the Jim Henson movies of the 80s. So it's almost like Fraggle Rock or Smurfs, but if there was xenomorphs in that kind of world, and you can see their characters made out of fabric. Everything in this world is going to be made out of fabric, and their arch nemesis that they're at war with are the number one villain to fabric, which is the evil moths. So the giant moths, these little guys are tiny. The evil moths want to eat them and lay larvae into them. And the first two guys you saw are Cotton Mayo, and then this is our professor, who's missing an arm from a horrific moth attack.
So this is just like a test. Well, it's not a test environment, but this is a test shot. And I mean, tell me how it plays. Is it pixelated?
It looks great.
Okay. So this character is temporarily rigged, right? And we just have like a mixed mode animation of him running, and then we have full rigs, but this is just like one of the tests that I will do. Gets us an idea of like how the cloth looks. So the cloth, like there was a question in Marvelous. The cloth is like goes through a lot of testing because basically it won't always sim perfectly. So it's basically changed until it sims as well as it can. And this is one of the tests. And so as we're building this environment and trying to get the look, we might as well just put the character in here. We do have like the depth of field really exaggerated just so that they feel like really small. It's just, so you can see. And I can jump out of the camera, and the environment is not done yet because we're still really in the middle of this. Hold up. Hide some of this. So the environment's not done, and it's pretty dark. But basically, here, a shot might be lit something like this, where it's the main key lights are not in it, but it looks all right. And then we'll put the key lights in based on the shot that we have. But I guess you can't really tell. Can you tell that this is all cloth? Okay, or I can try hiding something. And then it'll let the light in from the outside.
Yeah, it's like Art Nouveau meets Geiger meets fabric. Meets grandma.
They're also not, it's still dark. They're not textured, so it's a little bit hard to see. But you can see that it's very quilted.
And all of that is Marvelous Designer brought in at full resolution.
Yeah, and I think maybe I'll just show you in Maya. The windows we did a lot of tests with glass, and we decided the easiest way for the stained glass look was just to create a emissive material for anyone that's curious. And then, and you can see some of the stuff on the stream that we do on the Gnomon channel. But here, I think you'll probably see like some of the environment stuff. So we have like the bedroom. You can see this is super dense. Normally in the past, I would never work like this, but it doesn't matter. It's really light in Unreal. It's super fast. It doesn't care. So you just throw everything at it. And it really does cut down the man hours. We want everything to look cute. Even the table is quilted, right? So it's got a pattern. That's just top floor. They got a little couch. So it's very different than Voice of Hall. It does have a dark aspect, but also really hope that these characters feel cute and everything in their environment is cute. Like I think this is a really cute couch.
Well, that's what we're trying to do with this. Is we're trying to make this as the most beautiful, cute world possible with the cutest little characters,
Yeah.
and then put a
And then
demon in there to kill them all.
yeah. So yeah, and you can see that in the shot. Like you know,
It's not going to kill them all. It's just saying the threat. Like yeah.
yeah. You can see in the shot, like, you know, there's some elegance, I think, maybe in the environment, and then color palette and then all that stuff going on. And then I can also show one example. Forgot to turn off shadows. So this is, I haven't brought it into Unreal yet, but this is Substance Painter. And basically what, at least what we think it's going to look like right now. All the quilting, and if I get close, you can see the threads. There's like a lot of patterning. I want a bed like this. So yeah. The stained glass is just a submissive material.
What about Alembic? I mean, how is it to deal with the Alembic files? I know that a lot of animation use it in the pipeline, but it can be somewhat problematic bringing that into the engine. And if you're going to, if you're going to make some changes, what would you change in that pipeline?
Well, something that I think that would be great is if there was a way, and there technically is a way, but it was very unstable from when we tried it, which was a streaming Alembic, the way Maya deals with an Alembic when you import it, how it's just basically accessing a file on a drive, right? A .abc file. When you bring it into Unreal, it is converting it, I guess, into its own proprietary format. So if you make any changes, you do have to update it. That's not ideal, but that's just how we had to deal with it. We tried doing some of the Alembic streaming, which was actually, it was like a beta thing, very little documentation on it. And we were doing it because there's like a 2.2, 2.3, but it fluctuates, like sometimes a 2.0 gig file on an Alembic was the maximum it could bring in, and anything bigger than that, it would crash out. So when we tried to use the streaming one, it was to use one that was like a Houdini sim that was like gigs and gigs, 30 gigs or something. And it was so unstable that we were just like, okay, that's not going to work at all. So that's the only thing to keep in mind. Around 2.3 gigs is the limit of your Alembic file before it crashes on import. And there's a button. This is a huge thing. So if you're not starting at frame 0 all the time, let's say you're starting at frame 800, always make sure you turn on I think it's called like delete empty frames. Because if you do not, skip empty frames. If you do not, and you're starting at frame 800, it'll grab that first model from frame 600 and duplicate it 599 times, and you would just crash. It would take, first of all, it would take like 40 minutes to crash, and then it would crash. That button, if you're not starting at frame 0 every time, turn that thing on all the time. Skip empty frames in the Alembic import. Yeah.
But I think also, I'm going to try to talk louder because my voice is small. We're used to working in an Alembic pipeline. That's how we were before we started using Unreal. So it's just been part of our process. And we do shop model. So where if something's not right in the rig, or let's say the clock sim mess up, because the clock sim can just collide itself. And the easiest way is just to fix it separate program, which means we have to use Alembic anyway. So
Yeah. So we did have terrible rigging issues, and all of that we would just shop modeling. Shop modeling, for those that don't know, it's just basically ZBrush with a timeline. You would just go in, grab your Alembic file, bring it in, oh, your elbow's not deforming correct at frame 50, pull it out, control the in and out points, and now your alembic is going to have that sharp elbow transition, biceps or whatever, flexing, any of that stuff, any imperfections, we would just fix it rather than kicking it back to rigging, because we were modelers, we were not riggers. So it was easier for us to just fix that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to remove Kowena here. And we do have another live question from Liam. Go ahead, Liam. You should be able to talk.
Hi. So I've got to say, I mean, I'm so excited to see that you guys are guest speakers, because like both the stuff that I've seen from you guys is so beautiful in and outside of Unreal.
Thank you.
So thank you for coming. I think I love it when I see Unreal being used for stylized stuff, because it's good. It's shown that it's good at, like photoreal stuff and metahumans and everything. And but like it seems a little more rare that people make something that if you didn't know it was Unreal, you would never guess it's an Unreal. I think that's one of the cool things about the engine, and that's a cool thing about both projects you guys showed. So it's kind of a big question, but if you could just talk a little bit about, because I think both were done in Lumen, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
If you could just talk a little bit about your guys' approach and lighting, and any post-processing effects that you used, and how you made Lumen work for you to make it, and also if it's not too much, like what your color comp pipeline was, just because it looked so good. It didn't feel like something rendered in the game. It was textured and had great color. It was beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, you'll be disappointed to know that we're the most tech people on the planet. So our color pipeline was whatever the color was. So whatever we rendered, that's what we got. So we just spent a lot of time in the engine getting the color to be right.
Yeah.
I find, like, I used to be a modeler at Tippett and Digital Domain, but lately, the past 10 years, I've really shifted more into compositing. So my first thought when we went into this is, I'm like, oh, we're going to composite the hell out of everything. And it was just as fast to just do it in the engine. So we did a zero compositing. Not zero. The only shot that has compositing is when we integrated the 2D elements. That's the only shots that have compositing. That's it. Everything else, like when you would see the word koa or ala like appear really big.
Like text.
Yeah, the text. However, when it says Chewy, like the leopard tribe, that's actually in the engine. So each letter is placed at a different depth and scaled. So that's not even composited in there. So yeah, we try to keep everything in engine. The color there was no color pipeline. It was we were just grabbing our raw renders, putting them into Premiere. We were bringing it into Dehancer, which was giving it like halation and imperfections. And then we grabbed 16 millimeter scans and overlaid them and played the intensity of it. But that was it. That's the extent of our color pipeline.
Yeah.
So you didn't use like the post process in Unreal Color either?
Yeah. Well, we did.
So we didn't, but really, like, the way we worked is we lit a little bit brighter, because sometimes there's like noise in the shadows, or the shadow areas, if they get real dark, they have a certain look that looks kind of weird sometimes.
Yeah.
So we tend to light our shadows. So even if it looks really dark on one side of the face, it's actually got a light hitting it. And we would bring down the specularity so that it doesn't feel like a glossy light hitting the surface. It was just like a very soft light hitting it. And so the scene would be generally brighter. And then our post-process, we usually just bring the gamma down. And, maybe punch up the contrast just a little bit, punch up the saturation just a little bit. Without a post-process, it looks more lifted. But that's kind of
and we did look at it with chromatic aberration turned on and grain turned on, but we would turn them off at the final render, and then we would put in Dehancer Pro, which was the halation and chromatic aberration, and then the grain, like I said, we were doing 16 millimeter scan.
I think one of the first things I had to learn in lighting First, we started at 5.0, which they told us not to use, and it was harder. I do think 5.2, it feels really nice to lighten it. Like the results of
Yeah.
It has,
it really has improved like a lot.
Yeah.
But I wasn't used to it because normally we don't always light a lot brighter and then bring it down.
Yeah.
But that's generally how we work. So we
Yeah.
turn off the post process. The main thing that is giving us is more gamma and just it being darker.
I
And
hope
you
that
guys, oh, sorry, go ahead. And did you mess at all with lumen bounces? I know you can control that in post process. Or did you just kind of use lumen as it comes?
Luminance is.
Yeah,
Right? We didn't,
pretty much.
I didn't even know you could do that. Where do you do that?
It's in the post process when you can turn up the
Well,
bounces.
really simple, right? So with some of the things now that we're doing now, the materials are more complicated. There's subsurface and everything. So there are some things that, you gotta look into the settings a bit more, but
Mhm.
in our, it's wood.
Yeah.
So a lot going on, like, or rocks or whatever.
Yeah.
So they were very simple materials.
Yeah.
So we got a few more questions.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Liam. Appreciate that. Cameron wants to know a little more details on how you made the stained glass in Threadlings.
That's where it cut out.
That's right.
The stained glass is literally just a texture. It's just a flat geometry that's curved because the windows are curved. And I brought into substance and I just painted the patterns. Just so you know, I teach texturing at Newman, so I am a specialized texture artist. But it's all in the texture, and the material is
So
just.
you're not really seeing through anything.
Yeah, and I did a lot of referencing too, because we try to do something where we're actually creating glass materials in Unreal. And all that became so complicated, and I started thinking, well, does everything actually have to have translucency? You can really, if you reference photos of like famous cathedrals, they just look like they're emitting light. So the material is simply an emissive material, which has less problems. So the problems that I was having was that was getting the translucent materials to show up in reflections, because we have a lot more reflections this time. We didn't really have any reflections in our last project. So the emissive material will reflect easily. And then as far as the light cast, that's handled by a light function, which is what I was trying to show before we cut out. So the light coming through that feels all colorful is completely fake.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now the light function, just look it up. There's part tutorials. Light functions can read texture maps, right? So you can plug in a map in it, except that it's only black and white. So what you have to do is create multiple light functions, 3 of them for your RGB channels.
We actually went in detail on how we did it because we're documenting the making of the Threadlings also on the Gnomon channel again. So if you look for it, it's there, and we did like a whole 2-hour thing on that.
Yeah, it's probably the one before the last one we did.
Yeah.
Before we took a break.
So you can find that there.
Yeah. So not the very most recent one, but the one before that. I think I talked about how I did it, and then I opened up the material and I showed how I set up the function and everything.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure glad that this next question was asked by somebody anonymously. It was like, which renderer did you use? Redshift? Unreal? It was Unreal. Of course it was rendered in Unreal. So Rob wants to know, did you guys use path tracing at all?
So no, we didn't. We didn't on Voice in the Hollow, and then when we started doing the Threadlings, we started doing tests with Path Tracer, and at first we were loving it. But as the set started getting more complex, we started feeling the render time, and we were like, wait a minute, this is kind of defeating the joy that we got in just being able to see everything, adjust everything in real time.
Yeah.
So we went back to Lumen. It's not as easy as just pressing it, turning it on and off. It's not like it just goes from good to better. All the shaders, you have to readjust them to work with Lumen or Path Tracer.
Yeah.
So as of now, we're going all in with just Lumen. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of spoiled because, you know, if a render takes a minute, I'm like, oh my God, a minute, right? Whereas before, like, you couldn't even hope in our old pipeline, we couldn't even hope to just see what it looks like in a minute.
There was shots on our this is our live action stuff that was taking 24 hours a frame, and there was, you know, some shots are 180 frames. And that was fine, but now it's like a minute a frame. These guys are animals.
Yeah.
So
So we're like, nah, let's just, and then the thing is, like, I feel like once you kind of know, I think the approach for me for lighting was like, you just gotta fake your lights, right? Sometimes you just have to use more fill lights and things like that.
you know, the main thing we've learned is when you're using V-Ray or Arnold, you're lighting like a photographer. But when you're using Unreal, you're lighting like a painter.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. You have to know that you need that fake bounce here, you need that, or that you need to bring down your diffuse in order to make the thing appear more photorealistic and backlit. You have to know that those are the things you want, and that's why I mean a painter. You would get that for free in something like V-Ray, but the trade-off in time, I rather just work in real time.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think it's not a bad idea. What I've seen some people do is they will light it in Path Tracer.
So they
So
yeah.
they see what the bounce is doing, and then you just remimic that in the
Yeah.
end. And that's it. you
Yeah.
know? And I think that's pretty smart.
Yeah.
All right, we do have a couple more questions and then we got to wrap things up because I know folks are probably needing to head out. But Dave O'Neill asks here, how do you decide to proceed with projects when an update to Unreal Engine comes out with amazing, capabilities in an update? Is it challenging to update to the next version? Do you ever update midstream? What's your policy?
We do. I mean, the thing is that I hope you guys can tell from the way we talk is we're not very tech savvy. So we don't use a lot of the stuff. We try to keep things the easiest, most simple way is always the way we're going to approach it.
Yeah.
The dumbest way is our way, right?
Yeah, the least number of steps.
The least number of steps, that's our way. Or sometimes brute force, but less technical. But at least it's like, we're just going to get this done. So when a new thing comes out and it's like, oh, it has blah, 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 most of the time, unless it's something like Nanite, it doesn't, or Lumen, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, so we just keep things like simple. But when we did with 5, of course, we had to update. Like we just, needed to update.
Yeah.
At this point, if 5.3, I'm not sure we would lead to that.
It's risky.
Yeah,
we
like
sure.
What we're getting so much in 5.2. So
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate to everybody, keep it simple, especially on your fellowship projects. They're giving you the same advice. Keep it simple, get it done. All right, we have another one that came in here. You make such beautiful work. What reasons did studios give you when they turned your other projects down?
Well, they didn't turn it down. There's a lot of Hollywood politics into this. So when we did like the Nino, it got picked up by a great company, great producers. The problem is we're first-time filmmakers. So the only way we get the movie made is once the movie's optioned, now you have to get the script done. So that now becomes the next challenge. Once you have that script done, you have to then attach a talent to it, or else the movie's not going to get made. And that was the biggest hiccup, because the way it works is they go, okay, we have to send it to the biggest actors in the world. What's cool is like every big actor has seen our films at this point, even though they turned us down as bastards. But some of them would say, yes, we want to be a part of it. And these were huge names. And they would say, but we want certain changes. And you could spend 4 or 5 months doing those changes. And then when you turn it back in, they're like, nah, you know what? We're on to something else. And you just did those 5 months worth of work and it all went to hell. The other thing is whenever they send the script out, they only send it to one actor at a time. And they give these actors 3-4 months to read it. So there was a case where we sent it to a really big guy. It took him 4 months to read it. He's like, "Oh, I'm super excited to read the script. I love the short." They all loved the short, or else they wouldn't have even gotten to even they wouldn't have even told us. But then they would say, "You know what? I need a break," and we just waited 4 months on them. So before you know it, you just add that up 3 times. That's a year, right? Then COVID struck, everything went to hell, and it just fizzled out. It's
just a difficult process.
It's a very difficult process. It's very heartbreaking, and that's why The Voice in the Hollow is probably as dark as it is because we were really depressed. We started doing The Voice in the Hollow. We were really bummed out. We're like, all right, we're gonna do this, and then we're moving to Montana,
Just
herding goats.
Just how that started was Alex was like, Alex owner
Alvarez,
Alvarez owner of Milne was like, I think I think we want to do something, work with a director to make shorts, and then we were like, give it to us, please.
Yeah. Alex is fully responsible for this, so he's the best.
Yeah. So that's we have deep connections with the school, and definitely without his help, and without the Unreal Fellowship, we would have never made it. First of all, I didn't even think we could do this in Unreal.
Yeah.
And with just that and then the support, that's how the Voice in the Hollow came about.
Yeah. But it's a tough industry. I mean, the cool thing is we just finished working with the South Park guys on something. So that was amazing. That was a huge thing for us. And we got to meet them. They loved The Voice in the Hollow. And that was, we're huge South Park fans. So meeting them was incredible. And the Voice in the Hollow, once we're able to announce it, I think you guys will be pretty
You'll be excited.
Yeah, you'll think like, oh, this is obviously where it should have gone. So yeah.
So we have one last question. I swear it'll be the end. One person wants to know, Jose wants to know. So after your fellowship short, Vision Quest, did you guys get a movie greenlit based off of that short, or what came out of Vision Quest? Anything?
So that's a good question. So we got a shopping agreement with the company that basically runs Holly Shorts. Forget what they were called. They were interested in taking it around, and we pitched it to 1 or 2 places, but that was happening right when our other project, the Nino, was dying. And there was something about pitching the project while your other film was dying that was so demoralizing, because you kind of feel like a panhandler while you're pitching this stuff. You're like, hey, but instead of giving me a quarter, it's, hey, give me $50 million. It's much tougher. So I was just like, you know what? I don't want anything to do with, I don't want anything to do with this. And that's why The Voice in the Hollow is in many ways the most uncommercial thing we've ever tried to do. We really did it for us. It's completely brutal. It's in Swahili. It's not commercial in any way. And I think that's why, in many ways, I'm the proudest of it, is because I did it for us. And
I think that I've always had an interest in animation as a format. It was just like, oh, we can't do that because you have to render every single frame. We can't do it. That will take 1 billion years for us to finish. And when Unreal came about, for us, it made it a complete possibility, where it just opened up all this whole other world that was like not accessible. Just trying to picture like rendering an old pipeline, something that's 5 minutes and it's every single frame has to be rendered. Yeah. It's not something at all we would dare try.
Yeah, but in terms of Vision Quest, I definitely do want to go back to it. I love the idea of a Goonies type story with this Mexican and Native American myth that we have a real nice pitch Bible for that. So it'll come back, and we'll have Brian play one of the voices of the zombies or something.
Awesome. I'm in. I'll do it. All right. Well, we need to wrap things up because we've kept you a little longer than normal, despite the whole internet thing and the crashing. Don't worry about it. We'll edit it out. It'll be fine. But I can only imagine what's going through the heads of some of the fellows here. It's I'll just probably reflect it right now and just say, wow, this is so powerful. You guys put your heart and soul into this. It was beautiful. Everything that you've created with Voice in the Hollow is fantastic. I can already see on Slack here, everybody's like saying, wow, thank you. Great. Super, as I would expect. But you guys are an inspiration. Please keep up the work. Do more. Even if it does drive you insane. I'll do my best to try and motivate you and be your cheerleader as much as I possibly can. And anytime you need some help, just let me know. And I bet you anything, if you talk to some of these fellows, they'd like to be able to help too, or maybe get involved in the future and work with you. Hard to say. That's certainly a possibility. These guys are talented so far, and I've only seen them for 3 days. So
that'd be add us on LinkedIn or Instagram. Half Empty Studios is on Instagram, and we know where you guys are at. We literally went through all the same stuff. So keep at it, and thanks to Brian and the fellowship for the amazing opportunity. And
I feel like it changed everything for me. But we also, when our live stream starts back up, if you have particular questions of how we do our pipeline, because we do get it is like our process in this live. You could just ask. You usually just go, oh yeah, this is how I did it.
Yeah, so we usually do that Fridays at 1 p.m. where we put it on pause until we nail down the script, because we were kind of running ahead a little too far. So we're getting the script done this week, and then we should start that stream again. That'll be on the Noman channel. And we'll see you guys there. And thanks again to the fellowship, Brian, and everybody